How often do the mainstream media outlets mention the terms coup or insurrection in reference to what just happened in Afghanistan? They're just chanting death to America, but they seem friendly at the same time. It's utterly bizarre. This is what CNN's Clarissa Ward said, reporting live from Kabul, Afghanistan, as the city capitulated to the Taliban. Now, what she's doing is extremely valuable, and it is something that many of us would not even consider doing, but most of us will invariably benefit from. Now, even though this too is CNN, what has CNN and the rest of the mainstream media in the West been up to even for just the last few years? So recently in the United States of America, the National Commission to investigate the January 6th attack on the United States Capitol complex began. Now, how was that actually covered from the day of on January 6th and over the last 6 months? What has been said about Kabul compared to that? Take essentially exclusively males of fighting age, mostly armed in the Taliban, coming into the capital of Kabul, compared to the mixed demographics, including those people who were just walking between that roped-off path in the Capitol building on January 6th. How was the media treating these people? What was it being said? What was being shown? What was being focused on? I'll agree with the characterization of what happened in Kabul by saying it's mostly peaceful. Very few shots were actually fired as Kabul capitulated. But can you remember how many shots were actually fired on January 6th? Now, World War Z was trending on Twitter, and Twitter is some of the same demographics that will be watching mainstream media. So I went on the trend and I checked and I saw some of the comments. You can go on and check for yourself. Now see if you can notice any certain characteristics about the people who were equating the fleeing Afghanis to zombies rather than the people that were in the film and in the books that were trying to escape ahead of the destruction that the zombies were going to bring to the places that they were in. Regardless, there have been some harrowing to horrific scenes just coming out of Kabul, and likely much more unseen has happened and will continue to happen over the next days, weeks, and months. So it's understandable that you'll have a lot of focus on the capital city of Kabul, but think about the rest of the country and how it fell to the Taliban, and compare that to the coverage of the supposed planned uprising nationwide in the United States after January 6th. Do you remember that? What was the mainstream media saying that was likely going to happen? What were the steps taken to prevent what was likely going to happen? Then what actually did happen? So let's get back to the people that we know were actually involved in the actions that happened in Kabul and the actions that happened in Washington, D.C. What's the general reception of these people? What percent of people in Washington, D.C. actually think that there was an insurrection? Even though the legal bodies that are in charge of trying these cases are not charging anyone currently detained with insurrection, and you compare that perception in Washington, D.C. versus the perception in the rest of the country and the rest of the world, something bad and negative happened. Laws were most definitely broken. But the perception of what actually occurred does matter. It is important, and you can see that between what happened in Washington, D.C. and what is currently unfolding in Kabul. You might have seen the footage of the Afghanis flooding to the airport, and then hundreds watching as dozens tried to clamber onto this footbridge and get onto this airplane. And there's a good chance that there was more Afghanis crammed into that one passenger jet. Few standing on the roof, people's legs hanging out in the open doors. I think it's a similar thing that you see some people do on trains, and they just didn't compute that the plane won't be able to take off in that situation. But regardless, that was a limitation to them being able to leave. But people wanted to leave. However, there's a good chance that there was more Afghanis, even just on that plane, crammed into that plane, than the number of Americans that actually exercised their ability to leave the United States of America in an orderly manner and be welcomed by whichever country they chose to go to, primarily due to Trump over his entire 4-year term. But instead they feel the need to just, I'm going to leave if the bad orange man wins. Now I'm reminded, and I think about what Trump was supposedly banned from social media for doing and saying, when I hear the Taliban representative respond to questions about censorship, saying that, you should address those to people like Facebook who claim to be for free speech. Now, the Taliban never made that claim. Sharia law never has been, is not now, nor will be anytime soon, about valuing free speech and independent inquiry. Now, in the aftermath, the same peeps who you hear focusing on the plight of especially the women and the children. Why would anybody think of the children? They wonder why you're seeing mostly men trying to escape. And it can't be that men have it as bad or worse under authoritarians of all sorts. It's not good for anyone. That's why it's authoritarian. That's why it's totalitarian. That's why it's anti-human flourishing. Read the actual laws. Read their actual history. See what they actually do. To everyone. Not just what you were being told they do to XYZ. And this is not unique to the Taliban. This is a feature of these collectivist ideologies. It's not a positive thing. It's not a good thing for most of the people subjected to it. It's only good for a few for some time, until there are too many of that few left. And then it's just down to you. This information is out there. If you're listening to this, you can find this information. We need to stop just relying on other people to relay certain information to us. Go out there and find the source. Actually read it for yourself. Understand it for yourself. Comprehend it before you go spreading it out there. So the same people that are talking about, oh, I don't care if Obama made the list. The Muslim ban is on Trump. Those are the same people right now saying, Biden had to do this way because it's Trump's plan. He had to do Trump's plan. So how many of you have actually read Trump's plan? Did Biden's administration actually list any new plan, or just say we're going to do exactly what Trump said we were going to do, so we're just going to do that? Which media sources actually tell you the details of either of those plans? Which also told you about the details about the list that was compiled under Obama's administration, and then indicated to you what Trump's ban actually did different from what was actually in that list and report? Now, because it's current timeline and the information age, I actually saw some footage of what I think was one of the people that was clinging onto the C-17 military jet before it took off. Some people fell off. Some people were caught in the landing gear. This footage isn't in the actual clip that I saw, and you might hear this referred to on actual media sources, but I don't think they'll show you the footage. But think about that footage, that self-shot footage, and then think about the self-shot footage from January 6th. Some of the footage has made it out, but in particular, there was some footage shot by somebody who was proven to not be a Trump supporter, who had said he was infiltrating that place with the intention to agitate things and get things going along and catalog this. That individual was later on lauded by the mainstream media, was actually paid for some of the footage that he took. Think about how that was handled versus what's going on here. Now, on that same day, as some men plummeted hundreds of thousands of feet from a C-17 jet, some people were glad to see that, despite the Taliban taking over, Afghanistan still had a female primetime news anchor interviewing one of those Taliban spokespeople. Now, this might have been after one of these other several not waiting 64 days after we took power press conferences that the Taliban decided to hold. It might have been when one of them decided to take more than the 0 questions that Biden took after his speech. It might have been during the actual conference, not quite sure. But one of the Taliban spokespeople mentioned and assured the general public, the world, that yes, the women under the Taliban will be able to have all the rights guaranteed to them under Islam. Now, I just saw today that that primetime state news program that I spoke of before now has the same number of female primetime anchors as CNN does, which is 0. But they said. So, when Nicole Wallace of MSNBC says that 95% of the people will agree with what Biden said in his speech addressing this Kabul capitulation, and 95% of the media will disagree, she conveniently leaves out that Biden did not address the many things that myself and others out there are mostly concerned about when it comes to what happened in Afghanistan. You have a female primetime news anchor, a millionaire. She's doing well and she's earned the money. People want to give her that money. I don't begrudge her for that. The day after Kabul has fallen, she comes out from this oh-so-patriarchal and anti-women United States of America to tell the masses what they think. When she does this, does she consider herself part of the 5% of media that would be in agreement with the current regime, or the same as these 95% of the people that she talks about? I don't know. One thing I do know is that we can all agree with the need for X, then have different ideas of the Y procedures that should be used to obtain X, and then be utterly opposed to the Z result of how X was achieved, without ever disagreeing on that need for X. And that is not at all bizarre. So I agree that a free and fair press, guaranteed by the laws that any society is constituted on, are foundational to a civil society that enables human flourishing. I also think that mainstream media in the United States of America and most of the world is not that X.